A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. For those present in the room and attending to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statement that you will make will be recorded and made public. For those solely observing in the room today, you may wish to know that the camera is angled away from you from the public gallery where you are sitting. A reminder to anybody speaking today that your voice will only be audible online if the microphone is switched on. We are not expecting any fire drills. If a fire alarm goes off, please follow the officers to the fire exit and out of the building in the delegated meeting points. For those having mobile phones or tablet devices, please make sure they're either switched off or on silent before the meeting starts. Please note that councillors on the committee may use their laptops or tablets during the meeting to view agenda and paperwork. Declarations of interest. Please ensure that you identify which items you have an interest in, state whether your interest is pecuniary or non-pecuniary, and given the reason that you have an interest. Members need not declare any interest in any item on the agenda where they have already listed their interest on the register of interest. Furthermore, you do not need to declare any interest just because, for example, you're a ward councillor. Thank you. Now I will do attendance. We have our committee members today, which is myself, Councillor Higgins. I'm the chairman of this thing. Councillor Morgan is my vice chair. Are you present?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm present.
Councillor Moore's the opposite lead.
Present, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Sherry Awala.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Chairman. I am present.
Councillor Nicola Brightman.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Councillor Jagdeep Singh, I believe you're deputising for...
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Alan Kaufman.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm present.
Officers tonight is Ros Johnson, our Planning Service Manager, sitting next to me.
Thank you, Chairman. Present.
Glenn Egan, Office Manager and Partner. Thank you. Alan Tilley, our Transport and Aviation Manager.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
And Meg Harani, our Team Leader and Planning.
Good evening, Chairman. Present.
Before I go, and obviously the person I can't do this out with is Steve Clark, Democratic Services. But I just want to come back to Meg. This is Meg's last meeting today. He's been a great servant for Hillingdon, and I would like to thank him and all his best wishes from the committee. And enjoy whatever you're telling to do.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Sorry to embarrass you, but I had no choice. You've been a great friend. Anyway, apologies for absence, please, Steve.
So apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Borough, with Councillor Singh substituting.
Welcome. Declaration of interest and matters coming before this meeting. Any members? No. Okay. Do we to sign and receive the minutes of the previous meetings? Is that agreed? Thank you. Matters that have been notified in advance or urgent. And to confirm that all items of business are marked Part 1 today and are considered in the public, and we have no items in Part 2 to be considered in private. Okay. Obviously, petitioners, you will have a dedicated time to speak. The light system is quite simple there. Green, you go. Amber means you've got 1 minute. And red means that you finish, and I will stop you. Please don't think I'm being rude to you, but you're delegated to that time. You have to work within that time. Councillors also will be addressing us. I can see a few in the room, so important ones as well. So I better be careful. We'll go straight off with item 6. Meg. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application that relates to 40 Station Approach, which is located at the junction of Station Approach and Northolt Avenue. The application is for a 3-storey building comprising a dental surgery on the ground floor and 6 residential units on the ground floor and above. Members will note from the history that a previous application was refused and the reasons for refusal are set out on pages 18 and 19. There were 2 reasons. One was the design and size and scale of the building, and particularly the roof elements of it, and secondly was the loss of the family unit, which is currently present on site. This is a revised version of that application, and it has been amended to include a family unit on the ground floor, and that is a 3-bed unit, and the application has been reduced in size in that the lift overrun and the works on the which comprise the 4th floor of the building have now been removed, and a transition between the properties on Northolt Avenue and the development is now proposed at 2-storey level rather than the previous 3-4-storey level that was refused. With these changes, your officers consider that the application is acceptable. Members will know that there have been quite a number of developments on Station Approach itself, plus the surrounding roads, Hardy Avenue, Dean Avenue and Northolt Avenue itself, and these have taken place over a considerable period of time, from the 1960s right down to the 2010s, and so there's no real cohesion of design or scale within the area. There are 60s developments which are of a different design to the 70s, which again are different to the 80s. There are 2 stories, 3 stories. There are some 4-storey buildings which have recently been developed on Station Approach. So there's also no real sense of scale as well. So in that context, your officers consider that the current building that's proposed is acceptable in design terms. It is a modern design, but again, there are modern buildings in the area, there are older buildings, and then of course there's the listed building at South Ruislip Station. So there's a considerable difference in design as well as scale, and for that reason your officers consider that this current application is acceptable. If I can just go through the plans. That's the site itself. It's currently occupied by a 2-storey building, and that's the building itself. Again, you'll see that the one building next door is of a different design, and then the one next to that is of a 1990s development. And these are existing plans. And this is the proposed ground floor with the dental surgery to the front and a residential unit to the rear, some parking to the rear and 1 space to the frontage, and then the residential units above. And that's the scale of the development. Relates reasonably well to the scale on the adjoining properties. And then that's the transition between the properties on Northolt Avenue and those fronting Station Approach. And again, the floor plans. This shows the impact on adjoining occupiers and the visibility from ground level. So it's unlikely that anything in terms of railings or barriers on the roof will be seen unless you're quite some distance from the property. And that shows it in context of the existing properties on Station Approach and Northolt Avenue. There is an element in terms of, while the building works are going on, of continuing to provide dental surgery facilities on the site, and that is proposed in a temporary building on the site, located in that position. That will be removed once the dental surgery is operating within the main building. And these are the properties in context. That's looking down Northolt Avenue and the rear of the site, and then the back of the properties next door, and then that's the site itself and the adjoining property. And so your officers consider that with the amendments that have been made, the application is acceptable. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. The petitioner is not present. The agent is not present, but the applicant is. I can see you there, Mr. Jones. We'll give you the 5 minutes. The lights will go on and then you can start.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Doran-Jones. I'm here in front of you in my capacity as the Director of Albion Housing Limited, the applicant for this development. Tonight represents the culmination of just under a year of working proactively with your officers to deliver a positively recommended application which is both policy compliant and delivers a suite of benefits for the local area and community. I'd like to thank the officers for their thorough and balanced presentation of the application today. Don't wish to repeat anything that's already been covered. However, I welcome the opportunity to outline the benefits as previously discussed, not only to Ruislip, but also with our commitment to the local area. The proposed development will deliver a 3-storey building comprising of 6 residential units and a dental surgery on the ground floor to re-accommodate the existing dental surgery, but built in a much improved space. The re-provision of this dental surgery provides the existing local business the opportunity to expand into a high quality space and remain in the local area to serve their local community. As members will see from the letter of support from the dentist, I don't think we have seen it, but we've worked with them from early conceptual stage and through design of this scheme to ensure that the space meets their needs and standards. The proposed development will also provide much needed housing through a provision of 6 residential units with both private outdoor space and a shared and landscaped area for the residents. The proposed development meets national space standards as well as providing both private and shared amenity space which exceeds the London Plan requirement. The mix of housing types ranges from 1 to 3 bed units. This mix is appropriate for the site's accessible location within a designated local centre. It's wholly in line with the national and local policy and has been discussed and considered appropriate and acceptable by your officers. Members will be aware that the site is within close proximity to a range of shops, services and good transport links. It's therefore considered to be an accessible brownfield location appropriate for redevelopment. In line with this, the proposed development prioritises sustainable transport methods such as walking and cycling and accordingly provides ample cycle parking. In line with the sustainable transport hierarchy, the proposed development also provides car parking spaces, a total of 5 spaces in all, of which 1 will be accessible. This is in line with your maximum car parking standards. We believe this proposal makes effective use of this underutilised and unattractive brownfield site to provide much needed housing and facilitate the expansion of a growing local business. We're committed to bringing forward development on this site positively and collaboratively and to the benefit of the local area. We ask members to follow their officer's recommendation and approve the application. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank my team, Studio Ike Hallett and Montague Evans, for bringing this application forward. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. Short and sweet. 3 minutes. You had 2 minutes left. You could have carried on. Okay. Any questions from members to the applicant? No? Okay. Next is the ward councillor. Councillor Tuckwell, would you like to...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to members of the Minor Applications Committee for allowing you to address you this evening. I'm grateful for the opportunity to submit my comments in relation to this application as Ward Councillor for South Ruislip. I have to note that the officer's recommendation is to approve this application, but that's only come about after some significant design changes to the original scheme that were driven through a combination of the previous residents' petition and the diligence of this committee previously. Removing the loft access structure, effectively what was a 4th floor, and setting back the 3rd floor that faces Northolt Avenue are welcome design changes that have improved the impact on what is a very prominent corner plot in a key part of South Ruislip. It also has to be welcomed that a 3-bedroom apartment is now included, as family-sized dwellings are much needed across South Ruislip and indeed Hillingdon. Having said all of that, it is unfortunate that in order to provide token external amenity space, the proposed roof garden will have to necessitate a structure that does not respect the neighbouring roof configuration. The development does not meet sufficient private amenity space, and the officer report actually questions the practicality of the roof space as an external amenity area. I would ask members in determining this application this evening if they look at the roof space to consider a condition that stipulates that any railings, etc., are set back so as to prevent visual clutter and to provide safe distances from the edges, etc. I would also like to draw members' attention to the fact that this development is situated in an air quality focus area given its proximity to the A40. On this basis, I would ask that a condition of an air quality action plan is applied that ensures that this development complies with policy EM8 of the local plan part 1 and policy DMEI 14 of the local plan part 2. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Has anybody any questions for the councillor? No? Okay. Okay, then I'll open it to the floor. To Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two main points on this development. I am a ward councillor for South Ruislip, so it's important we get this right. With regard to the officer's report, I think this is a very good and well-balanced report. From the architect's point of view, I think, again, a very good, how can I say, reversal of the original. So well done on that. My main concerns are two. One is the balcony at on the roof garden. Now, if you only have a metre, say, glass balustrade going round that, what's to stop, sort of, if you have a party up there and some young child throws a bottle over the top, which is a concern for me. And secondly, the officers who did the parking arrangements and that found various parking places for this development, I'm not so sure that, there are that amount of parking within the area. I mean, the area is virtually totally parking management scheme. So I would ask the officers to answer those two questions. I have a possible solution to the glass at the top, where if you've got a metre, you could actually put another piece on the top to stop things going over, but that's just me. So, officers, could you answer the balcony issue and also the parking issue?
Meg, if you'd like to.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll take on the balustrade and balcony issue, and I'm sure my colleague will answer the parking questions. In terms of the balustrade and balcony, there is a condition number 4 which requires details of this to be submitted. Clearly the applicants are here and they've heard what members have to say about the design of those balustrades and their position. Details of that have to be submitted as part of that condition, and we would have to approve that. So we can take into account members' requirements on that issue and hopefully ensure that the availability of throwing things over and so on isn't there with that condition. Thank you, Chairman. If I can pass to my colleague.
Thank you. Alan, do you want to pick up on the parking issue, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. There will be 6 units and 4 car parking spaces. For a development in this location with a PTAL of 3, the London Plan car parking standards allow a maximum of 4.75 spaces. So the 4 provided is in accordance with policy. And as the councillor pointed out the area is surrounded by parking management schemes and parking restrictions. So in effect, 2 of the units will be car free, 4 would have access to car parking.
Is there any chance that we can have those allocated or not?
Yes, I would agree that that's a good idea, and that could be secured by condition, Meg? Roz?
Does the committee agree with that? Yeah. Councillor Coffin, can you turn your microphone off for me, please? Councillor Coffin, turn it on. Yeah, Councillor Morse.
I just note that on page 29, the applicant says there appears to be the real 30% spare parking capacity. It goes on to say that there was further evidence taken out by officers and they supported this position. What checks were taken out by officers regarding this parking?
The report mentions that random checks were carried out by councillor officers. However, my preference would be to guide committee towards allocating 4 car parking spaces to 4 units and having 2 as car free, not being reliant on parking on street at all, whether or not there was spare capacity, if that's okay, Chairman.
Okay, I mean, I'm to be honest, I'm very surprised that we've actually got parking at all in here, considering the public transport around it is very good. So, you know, having a few we can allocate, I think that's a really good. Anybody else got any more questions? Okay, can I have someone to take me out? Thank you, Councillor Moore.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to go with officer's recommendation to go with the amendment on the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. And Councillor Shearer, all right?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Well, you have it tabled, Steve. Can I have a vote? All those in favour of the officer's recommendation with those additional conditions that we said about parking? Yep. That agreed. That's agreed, full house. Thank you. Okay. Now we go on to you may leave if you've spoken. It's just obviously do it quietly. And there we have one of the councillors throwing his sign around, so there we go. Okay, we go to item 7. This is 72 Harefield Road, Uxbridge. It's up for refusal. Meg, would you like to do the presentation for me, please?
Thank you, Chairman. This is, again, another application for the demolition of a 2-storey dwelling on the site and the erection of a building to provide 9 units. The site is currently occupied by a detached dwelling and it's located close to the junction of Harefield Road and Fairfield Road. Members again will know that there have been redevelopments on Fairfield Road and the surrounding roads in recent times, and this is an application which follows on. The principle of the development is considered acceptable. The issue is the design of the development and the impact on the adjoining occupiers. In terms of the design, the officers consider that its overall size and scale isn't compatible with the surrounding properties. Its design does take some cues from the adjoining property in particular, but given its size and scale, it is different in that the front gables are larger, the roof is different, and the rear element of the scheme is particularly, in your officer's view, poor in terms of its design with regard to a very large crown roof and the impact that in terms of its depth has on the adjoining occupiers. The adjoining occupiers are sited approximately 2 metres. The flats are sited 2 metres off the boundary, and the building would project some 6.5 metres beyond these flats on one side, and on the other side, number 74, Harefield Road, your officers consider it does have windows in the side elevation of the outrigger. Those are either secondary windows or non-habitable room windows, but it is the depth of the extension and the impact that that would have in terms of the use of the space, the garden and the outside space for that property. So it's recommended for refusal on the basis of its design and appearance and its impact on adjoining occupiers. If I can just go through the plans. That's the site as it currently is, and that's the proposed. Members will see at the bottom the design cues from the adjoining property. However, they are different in terms of their appearance. So this is the existing property. Your officers feel that it is not of such an architectural requirement that it be retained, so its demolition is acceptable. And these are the proposed ground and or lower ground and elevations, and then the ground floor and first and second floors. So that's the front elevation onto Harefield Road. It is proposed to dig down into the site, and that's the existing property, and they've taken looking at the site from the flats adjoining. And so in essence the proposed building would be 6.5 metres from the back of that building that you see in the photograph, which is this particular building. And that's looking at number 74 and the windows in that elevation, and again the building would project some distance beyond the main element of that building, and your officers again consider that it would impact particularly on the use of the patio garden area of that particular property. So the application is recommended for refusal on 2 grounds. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I saw the CGI on this and I thought we were going to go retrospective, but it was that realistic, but there you go, it wasn't. So first of all we have David Emmanuel QC. We have legal. Okay, Glenn, we've got someone the same ilk of you now. So you're going to speak on behalf of the 2 other petitions, is that correct?
I am, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I speak on behalf of the petitioners who are opposed to this application. The report refers to 83 who signed the internet petition, but there were in fact another 60 who signed the handheld one that was passed around the local area. Along with the 28 letters of objection, this is clearly a very strongly opposed application locally. And you will note also that the ward councillor, who I don't think can be here today, supports... I do beg your pardon. Well, I won't speak on his behalf then. We acknowledge the reasons given for the refusal recommendation in the officer's report. We echo them and we support them, and I won't waste my valuable time reiterating them. I address you in relation to other matters of concern, all of which we say should be considered further reasons for refusal. They fall into 2 broad areas. Firstly, the car parking spaces, and secondly, the height and impact behind the property, which hasn't been referred to in the report, on the existing residents there. So I turn to the car parking area first of all. It's not just the fact that there's provision for 12 car parking spaces, but it's their location and the fact that 10 of them are to be at the back of the property. We saw very briefly on the site plans a picture of them. They are right at the back behind the green space that's being left. But what you don't see is the overall bird's eye view that shows that it is effectively a building of a car park in the middle of a set of residential gardens. It backs on directly to 2 Cambridge Road. There is a fence that will run along that car park, which is the garden of 2 Cambridge Road, and it's suggested that 12 cars should come in and out, starting their engines up that close to somebody's garden, and all the other gardens on the sides. And also, if we look at that picture there, the green space for the development itself. This is effectively a small car park being parachuted into a residential area, well, right into the middle of it. Not at the roadside at the front, where there are only 2 spaces, but right next to all the gardens at the back. And this is of great concern to local residents. It's of great surprise that the report ignores this. We note policy DMT2 highway impacts states development proposals must not contribute to the deterioration of air quality or noise or safety of residents. And we suggest that 12 vehicles starting up effectively in your garden or right next to it can only contribute adversely to all of these. Engines spewing out pollution straight up into the air next to your garden and the adjoining gardens, we suggest that is another reason for refusal, and it's an important one. The second aspect relevant to the car parking spaces is the congestion and the effect on traffic in the local area. 12 extra cars, one only has to look at the location of this property between the junctions of Fairfield Road and Cambridge Road and opposite Fairlight Drive. 3 junctions already onto that busy, narrow, congested road, and now a suggestion of what it will effectively be a new junction as 12 vehicles come in and out every day from another part of the road right in the middle of that. We suggest that can only have an adverse impact on road safety. It's a very narrow part of the road anyway there. The pavement is extremely narrow. And the idea that 12 cars are now to be injected into that area is of particular concern to a congested road at the best of time. It's a part of Harefield Road where snarl-ups occur all the time. Those familiar with the area will know that just to the right of Cambridge Road, when you come out, there are car parking spaces along one side, and so there's only really one side of the road that cars can travel down. How it cannot be said that adding a further 12 vehicles to that part of the road cannot adversely affect the area with congestion and road safety, adding to the delivery vehicles that will come and go, is beyond the petitioners, and another, we suggest, legitimate reason for refusal. The second area of concern relates to height. On top of those points already mentioned in the report and reasons for refusal, there are 2 other aspects we ask to be considered. Policy DMHB11 of the local plan part 2, development proposals should not adversely impact on the amenity, daylight and sunlight of adjacent properties. There are beautiful sunsets. The sun goes down behind number 72. It will deny the properties at 2, 4, 6 and 8 Cambridge Road sight of those sunsets with this enormous building going up, and the properties on Fairfield Road 2 and their gardens. So there's that point, the height and the sun. And secondly, there are the balconies. I have 10 seconds left. Balconies which will project over the back gardens. That is ignored in the report. It only talks to the adjacent side. The noise and the invasion of privacy in the view of those gardens are a relevant factor too. Thank you so much.
Well done. Very well done. Okay, has anybody got any questions for the petition? No? Okay, fine. Thank you very much. We go now to the applicant, Mr. Chris Barrett. See you next. Again, you know the rules, 5 minutes. Amber light will come on and tell you that your time is up. We've got 1 minute left.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to use my opportunity to address this committee to provide you with the background information that has not been included in the report that is before you. This application that you are considering is the result of extensive consultation with the planning department. We submitted our original scheme for consideration by way of the pre-application advice service that is offered. After the assigned planning officer had considered it and received the comments from the various departments involved in formulating a response, we were sent a report that required us to make several design changes, including reducing the rear projection of the building. Then that would enable the officer to be able to support the scheme. We were told at this point to change the rear roof design from a tiled pitch roof to a crown roof with a dummy pitch. So we are surprised to read in the officer's report that this style of rear roof is unacceptable to the planning department. Once we received the report, we had our architect redraw the scheme incorporating all the changes that were asked of us. We then paid for the follow-up pre-app service. I have a screenshot of the officer's conclusion in the follow-up pre-app report, and it states, it is considered that the submitted application for follow-up pre-application advice does, on balance, address the previous concerns raised. At this stage, we were asked to address a concern the tree officer had about the scheme, so I met him at the site to discuss this. The outcome of this meeting was the tree officer's concerns were answered to his satisfaction, so now he has no objection to the development. We were made aware that a petition against the development had been submitted to the planning department, which then requires the application to be decided by this committee. I have a screenshot of an email sent to us shortly before the planning officer passed her report to the manager. It says, my draft recommendation is one of approval. After the manager looked at the proposal, we received an email outlining 4 points of concern the manager had. 2 of these points were simple technical questions that we answered immediately. The third concern regarded the height, roof design and overall look of the building. I have provided the committee with a street scene drawing and CGI showing how the proposed building would look. I believe, and more importantly, the planning officer appeared to think it was a suitable design. We offered to discuss some minor changes to try and satisfy the manager. However, the 4th point baffled us totally as it concerned the rear outlook for the neighbours, specifically the block to the right. I provided photos to show that the view from these flats is completely blocked by a dense row of evergreen trees on their side of the boundary that were protected by a TPO, so they couldn't be removed. After receiving the first pre-app report, we narrowed the rear element of the building to be 3.5 metres from the boundary. We also fully complied with the 45-degree sightline guidelines. Making any further reductions to the rear element would render this scheme unviable and would require us going back to square one. Begging the question, was there any point in extensive consultations with the planning officer if at the final stage there is no agreement between the case officer and the manager, making you wonder why no consultation had occurred at an earlier stage? We are a local property development company and have recently completed a new development of flats in Ickenham's conservation area at 88 Long Lane. This development was also opposed by petition but was decided favourably by this committee. The feedback we've received for that building has been very positive, and as the planning department has raised no concerns regarding the replacement of the existing building in Harefield Road with flats, and the proposal doesn't fail any technical policies, we believe we can deliver a high quality replacement building, providing a range of desirable homes. So despite the officer recommendation, which you can see was changed from approval at the last minute, I would ask you, the planning committee, to approve this application. I would just further add that the previous speaker, who was referring to the car parking at the rear, I would like to make clear to the committee that both sides surrounding have their car parks at the rear as well. So there are no garages. Admittedly, there are garages on the road behind, but the 2 surrounding are their car parks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions from members to the okay, fine. Councillor Goddard.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'm speaking to you as a ward councillor for Uxbridge North Ward. Members of the committee, unfortunately, I think this is one of a whole sequence of such schemes that you're asked to consider. And the essence of all of these schemes is the desire to include a court in a pint pot. Very simply, it is gross overdevelopment, and you see that in the impact on the street scene, and you see it in terms of the impact on neighbours and their light and their access to views. These points, I think, have been very adequately drawn out by the officer's report, and we are fully supportive of the position on them. Like the petitioner, I believe there are points to be made about parking and about vehicles. The reality is that this is a 9-flat development, and were it to be built, and here again I'm referring to the officer's report, it would have the capacity to contain 35 people. So you have to ask yourself, whilst it's absolutely right that the maximum parking allocation for this development should be 12 spaces, unless there's some sort of covenant or condition imposed, there must be the reality that there will be a greater number of cars attaching to this development. If you look at Harefield Road, it is, as has already been said, a main thoroughfare down into and out of the town centre. It already suffers from congestion, and I would venture to suggest to you that the addition potentially of another 20 cars materially adds to that problem. Furthermore, parking. If one is not parking on the site in one of the designated spaces, where does one do park? So I therefore suggest that it's absolutely right that this committee should follow the officer's recommendation and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goddard. Does anybody have questions for Councillor Goddard? No? Okay, fine. Then, Ros, you'd like to come back on some of the stuff that's been said?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to assist then. So, starting with the points made by the QC on behalf of the petitioner. So, I've jotted down, there were a number of points that were referred to. So, the first is relating to noise and air quality impacts resulting from the position of the parking area. Second, road safety. Thirdly, the heights of the building, and in particular in relation to properties at the rear, and the impact that that would have on sunsets. Apologies. And then finally, the balconies in terms of overlooking. So my sort of professional advice is that these are all valid material considerations. Having considered them myself, I don't feel they warrant additional reasons for refusal, but obviously, members, that's a matter for yourselves. My own view is that the reasons for refusal that we're proposing are sound, and that they are the justified reasons for refusal, so I would be inclined to stick with those. Just moving on to the comments made by the applicant, I acknowledge the applicant's comments regarding the pre-app process. I think it was clear from the comments that it was quite a finely balanced recommendation from the officer, and I think we'd all agree that pre-app comments are given in good faith, but they don't prejudice the council's formal decision. And of course, that's the way that the planning system should work. We should be able to take into account comments and representations that arise through the planning process and take full account of the details. So I don't see an issue with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ros. Okay, open it to the floor. If you want to take away, Councillor Morse.
Mr. Chairman, I've read the report carefully. One point I would disagree with: the existing dwelling is not considered to be sufficient value to resist its loss. I take the view that the existing dwelling contributes to the ambience of the road. The other point of concern, which is possibly missing this, is I'm not happy with the amenity space if the property was to go through, but as it's a very strong refusal, I'm completely in agreement with the officers. I think this is totally inappropriate and is overdevelopment of the location. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I will propose officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillors. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair. I'm agree with John and the officer recommendation, like car parking, overdevelopment, noise, height, balcony. So I'm the second.
Thank you very much. So I have it seconded and proposed. Councillor Morgan, do you want to add something?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I totally agree with fellow councillors on this. It is an overdevelopment of this site, especially when you look at the size and bulk where they're having to dig down into the soil to get the extra floors available. Yes, we know that we're always looking for extra flats, extra housing. However, we do have to take into consideration that the impact it will have on this road in particular. Harefield Road is quite a narrow road in certain places, and in particular this area, and to then suddenly have an area where we were saying 12 cars, we're looking at 9 properties or nine apartments. If you then turn around and say, well, each apartment's going to have 2 cars, that's 18 vehicles. you've only got space for 10 or 12 of those. Where are the others going to go? Mr. Chairman, it's already been proposed and seconded, and I totally agree with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got a proposed and seconded. Can I have a vote of hands to go with officers' recommendations as they are in the report? Thank you very much. That's unanimous, Steve. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your time. We're going to move on to item 8, which is 78 Manor Way, Ruislip. Meg, would you like to take us away?
Thank you, Chairman. If I can bring members' attention to the addendum sheet, we have received a petition in relation to this application against the proposed development. The grounds of objection set out in the petition are covered in the main report. This is an application for a raised patio and fencing to the rear of the site. The site is part of the Ruislip Manor Way Conservation Area. If I can just take members through the history, as it were, members will know that under permitted development, patios or raised decking or anything of that nature can be constructed in the garden area up to a height of 0.3 metres without permission. The application granted in 2019 granted permission for a single-storey rear extension and a patio area of approximately 0.31 metres in height. When that patio area was constructed, it was unfortunately raised to a height of just over half a metre and led to what we have in front of us. The application is now to reduce that patio area at 0.5 metres to 0.4 metres in height. So it will be slightly above what will be permitted under permitted development. Your officers need to consider the impact of what would be granted under permitted development as opposed to what is being proposed. And in considering that, your officers consider that the additional impact from 0.09 metres of extra height is not such that a refusal could be justified on grounds of overlooking loss of privacy or noise and disturbance. So we are recommending approval on that basis. If I can just go through the plans. That is the ground floor plan with the extension and the patio area. And that is what was there before, and that's what's been constructed. It's just to show that what has been constructed in terms of measurement. I'm just looking at that from the adjoining properties. So your officers consider that the additional 0.09 metres is not sufficient to refuse the application, and therefore it is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ed. Can you go to the actually what's there now? Are we saying that that's going to be moving down?
That's going to be reduced.
Yeah, okay. So I wanted members to be aware that it's not finished, it's going to be reduced down. Okay, we'll go straight now to petitioner, Mrs. Trill. If you'd like to, you have your 5 minutes, and you know the system. So.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Councillor and planners. I live next door. I do not wish to denigrate my neighbour in any way. I would just like my privacy back. This is only on the agenda because the applicant breached their planning approval and now doesn't want to go back to what they were permitted to build. I don't go onto my patio anymore, and I have been startled when I've turned round in my kitchen and lounge to find people staring at me. It is so high, even young children can see over the top of the existing trellis at 2 metres. How can this be right? The permitted development rights of a maximum of 30 centimetres are there for a reason. Photo B, please. To protect people from this situation. Surely there has to be special circumstances for them to be exceeded, not just for aesthetics. The photo of what the garden looked like before shows no visible sloping ground. I and other neighbours have a couple of steps out of the patio door and then a step from the patio onto the grass. The measurement given in the report of 525 millimetres near the house is arbitrary and academic. Arbitrary because the applicant's ground had already been excavated before measurements were actually taken. It had already been built. And academic because quite clearly, as shown by the photos, people are even chest height above any point of the fence and trellis 2 metres high. My photo with a ruler, taken next to the fence, shows the existing height to be nearer 0.6 metres, twice permitted development. So what difference will lowering it by the proposed 125 millimetres, less than 5 inches, make? Is it going to be policy in future to say it's okay to go at least 30% over permitted development rights? You can put a plan in for a patio, build something completely different and barely reduce the height when asked to. How can that be allowed when other people are trying hard to keep within planning guidelines? By downplaying the amount of height over the permitted development, it is still actually a minimum of 30% extra, and at a final proposed height of 625 millimetres, it's more than double permitted development. This puts out the message for others they can automatically go at least 30% over permitted development. An application of similar height at 5 Chiltern Road, Eastcote was refused on application and on appeal. Another case was rejected by Hillingdon in relation to putting in a fence to restore privacy. Screening would not be a satisfactory solution, and it is not sensible to permit development that is otherwise unacceptable by hiding it. Decking results in overlooking of the neighbouring property and results in a loss of privacy. The case numbers are included in my official comments. Privacy is not only visual, it is also audible. As they are elevated, I can hear every word as they can hear me. The report says that the proposed changes should be enough and should lessen the likelihood of overlooking. Nowhere does it say the changes will prevent overlooking. It implies that a refusal wouldn't be held up in appeal, but 28 residents who signed my petition don't agree this should go through, and 2/3 of appeals fail. The officer writing the report has not been to see it, but was invited. He initially told me he was of a mind to refuse it. So whatever the actual dimensions are, just look at the pictures and ask whether you would like this next to your house, if you would like to be overlooked to this degree. The photos showing people chest height demonstrate that replacing this with a 2-metre fence, an identical height as the top of the trellis in the photos, and reducing the structure by only 125 millimetres, less than 5 inches, is going to do very little to protect privacy. A new trellis won't prevent overlooking. I only agreed to a new trellis on condition the height is lowered further than 125 millimetres, but this hasn't been proposed. Because of its sheer width and depth, I can see people standing virtually anywhere on it, as in turn they can see me. I feel vulnerable, exposed and unsafe. Mr. Chairman, councillors and planners here today, I only started my petition on Friday and easily obtained more than the numbers required in support, 28 in total, to oppose it. Residents in my road have come round to see this or seen the photos and don't want something like this built next to them. If this gets voted through with minimal changes to the height, then it leads the way for others to be built. It may cause a lot of upset and headaches for planning officers and other residents in future. It sets a precedent. Raised platforms are rarely approved unless there is significant sloping ground which justifies the need. I would ask members to vote against the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have before I get officers to come in, I just want to know, there's a statement, I believe. Would you like to read that out, please, Steve?
Okay, so I'm reading this statement on behalf of the applicant. We have recently been made aware of a petition against our retrospective application, laying out the application number. Unfortunately, we have pre-booked a holiday and we are flying at the time of this committee meeting, so cannot attend in person to represent our application effectively. We do note that the officers have recommended that the application be approved. However, should the committee be minded to refuse the application, we would request you defer your decision to a future meeting where our views as the applicant could better be represented. Please note, we have not been informed as to the identity of the petitioner. However, given the nature of the petition, we have assumed that the petition was organised by or on behalf of a resident at an adjacent address that we've redacted for legal reasons. In regards to the response to this petition and to provide background, we previously submitted an application for a single-storey rear extension, which included a raised patio on the drawings. The application was approved on the 7th of August 2019. The approved design did not contain any detailed patio dimensions. Our architect advised us that given the council would normally mandate these dimensions if there were any concerns, there were no restrictions on the patio's size. Please note there was no complaint pre-approval about the raised patio on these approved plans. Once building commenced, we were made aware of the complaint and the enforcement officer visited our property. Once advised, we stopped all further work. The enforcement officer told us that although the plan did not have any conditions on dimensions, he felt that there was a difference between what was built and what was drawn on the plans. At this stage, I think it's important to note the difference between the two properties. The neighbouring property has a back door at ground level, and our back door is around 50 centimetres from the ground. We worked with Hillingdon Council Planning Department and accommodated nearly all of the requests of the planning officer to mitigate any possible overlooking on our neighbour at number 80's garden, including an agreed reduction in its height of 10 centimetres, a taller fence and planting area adjacent to the fence, all at significant cost and disruption to ourselves. This has served to prolong the building work, which has been disruptive not just to our neighbours, but also to our son who was sitting his GCSEs. We feel we have been very accommodating, to be honest, in some cases almost under pressure to please others and not our home, community and family's needs. As the height, 40 centimetres, is the proposed petition's concern, we like to note that in the enforcement letter, it states that the previous patio was around 30 centimetres in height. We feel this is incorrect. The previous patio and steps are still visible in places and measure at 34 centimetres from the ground in height, and this is including a previous raised planting area that existed. In the new plans, we are asking for 40 centimetres in height, which is a difference of 6 centimetres and only 10 centimetres above the permitted development allowance. Therefore, it is not, as the petition states, 30% higher than the permitted development rights. In terms of the fence that is currently in place, the petitioner claims that it is 200 centimetres high. It is not. It is 160 centimetres high with a trellis of 30 centimetres on top. The petition states that a 30 centimetre trellis, which is see-through, will not restore privacy. The trellis is for decoration. Although we and planning disagree with this statement, the petition is contradictory in the justification in points 3 and 4 of the petition. You could argue the current fence is just 160 centimetres and a 200 centimetre fence is a vast improvement, especially with the agreed 10 centimetre reduction on the patio height, totaling an improvement of 50 centimetres. A further point to place on record is that just a few days ago we received approval notification via our architect on an email from the council for this application. We confirmed this with our neighbours who received the same approval email expressing their delight for us. After a day of concern and worry, I emailed the council to confirm. They told me that this was an administration mistake to our disbelief. This has brought further stress to this whole ordeal. Our final point is we are just a family of 5 trying to improve our property to suit our needs. We are not residents that cause vast amounts of noise and issues which our other neighbours down Manor Way fully support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm going to get officers to come in to make some clarifications on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, there's just one point really that I wanted to make. I think you'll have sort of picked up from what we've heard, but essentially we're talking about a patio that would be 10 centimetres higher than would be allowable under permitted development. Now, if we were talking about a permitted development patio, we'd have no control over the boundary treatment. So actually what we're looking at here is 10 centimetres higher than would be permitted development, but we're able to condition the boundary treatment. So we're talking here about a 2 metre high screen with additional 0.3 metre high trellis. And if you turn to your conditions, we're actually insisting as part of that the fencing is installed concurrently with the development and then thereafter retained and maintained. So personally, I think this is actually a good solution that's been negotiated. And the other aspect as well was that we've negotiated the planted strip adjacent to the boundary, which just gives some separation. So I actually think that this is a good solution. If we were to refuse this, we'd be looking at a potential appeal, and we would obviously then lose the control. It would be down to the inspector in terms of any conditions. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ross. Okay, I'm going to open it to the floor. Be mindful of the report, please. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Can I just ask officers, on the condition for the height of the fencing, are we talking at ground level or from the patio level? Because obviously this is the part of the discussions that's been going on here, that we're getting two different measurements, and we just want to clarify exactly what it is we're looking at. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So the measurement for the fence and trellis is taken from the ground level, but I think the best way to sort of see that is on the drawing. You can see how it sort of relates to the patio, so that would in effect be the approved drawing, which we would enforce against if there were any issues.
Yes.
Can I come back on
Yes.
that? So if the patio is 50 centimetres higher than it should be, and you've got a 2 metre fence, it's actually just 1.5 metres. So in this case, we're looking at 40 centimetres.
Yeah, Councillor, hang on a second. It's actually how much? Ross, can you?
Yeah, if I can just clarify. So it has been built at 0.525, but it's been negotiated that would be reduced to 0.4. So what you saw in the photo would be further reduced. So I'm just trying to see if there's a particularly good paragraph, but essentially you would have, so if you're standing from the patio level, there'd be 1.6 metres of fencing plus the 0.3 on top, so a total of 1.9, sorry.
So it's less than 6 foot. So if you're normal stand, the average height now of a male in this country is 6 foot or just over 2 metres. That fence and trellis, he looks straight over the top.
However, Councillor, you could of course build a permitted development patio at 0.3, so I think you need to take that into account, because that's quite common in a situation, and you would normally have a 2 metre high boundary treatment, so we've actually negotiated something higher.
Okay, Councillor Brightman.
It's just a quick legal question, actually. If we're permitting this to be 10 centimetres higher than permitted development, have we sort of opened the floodgates so that everybody can do it, and that can be cited as a reason for anyone in the borough to be able to do that?
Chairman, obviously the answer there is, of course, every planning application is judged on its merits. They don't bind any inspector or the council, but they're always quoted back at you at some time or another. I think I just reiterate the advice of Planning Services Manager there. The council's hands are tied to a degree here. There's an application which the council can influence by conditions which have been agreed. If the application is not approved tonight and it goes on appeal, and there is no guarantee those conditions will be agreed by a further inspector. So I think it's by an inspector in the future. So I think it's a question there of judgment as, is the planning harm that potentially would arise from allowing this application, is it such that you are prepared to risk those conditions at an appeal, if I might put it that way? At the moment there's control the council has. If that's sufficient for your purposes, my advice would be grant the application. If you think the control is not sufficient for your purposes, then my advice would be you can refuse it, but of course there's no guarantee what the outcome would be on an appeal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does that answer your question, Councillor Martin?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Just a question to officers. What if we asked so you've negotiated this 40 centimetres, so we can't, the committee itself, can it change it to make it 30?
Members, you need to make a decision on what's in front of you. Yeah.
So it's what's in front of us. Yeah, I knew you were going to say that, but I thought I'd better ask. Okay, so is anybody going to take me out on this, please? Councillor Brightman.
Yes, I'll go with officers' recommendations.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Singh.
I'm second with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. I have it proposed and seconded. Do I have can I have a show of hands by members if you approve the officer's recommendation here? So 1, 2, 3 and 1 abstention, correct? Okay. Okay, got that, Steve? Thank you. So that's moved now. We go on to item 9, 56 Swan Road.
Thank you, Chairman. 56 Swan Road, members will be familiar with this application. It was deferred at the previous committee, and it is for a site visit. That site visit did take place, and members saw the site on the 13th of July. If I can bring members' attention to the addendum sheet, we have received further correspondence from the objector reiterating concerns about loss of light. The objector considers that the cumulative impact of the proposed extension and loft conversion should be taken into account, and similar extensions in other properties are not comparable as they did not have an outrigger. The objector also comments on the requirement for a shadowing diagram. Members did discuss the issue of shadow diagrams at the previous committee, and it was suggested by a member that diagrams should be produced. However, this was not a formal request, nor was it voted on, and officers were not requested to produce such a diagram by the committee. In officers' views, a shadow diagram is unlikely to add anything further to the information before members, given that members have made a visit to the premises and seen for themselves what possible impact there might be. It's also evident that given the situation of number 54 to the north of the site, there will be some impact. It'll be limited to between mid-morning and midday, and also that the extent of shading would also be limited. Therefore, a refusal based on overshadowing is unlikely to be sustained at appeal. I think, other than what I had to say on the previous committee, I don't have anything further to add other than to say that members are considering only the single-storey extension. The impact of the dormer windows or any other works that have gone on to the property is not a consideration. The site, in your officers' view, and the information that is before officers, is not in use as an HMO, and if members approve this application, it cannot be used as an HMO once the extension is built. So that again is, I think, what I would call a red herring. So members need to consider only the rear extension in this particular case. If I can just refresh members' memories. That's the application. 3.6 complies fully with the Council's policies in terms of its depth and height, and the back of the site and the adjoining property and the front. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. I'm going to ask Ros to come in because I just want to make it quite clear that shadowing diagrams never are required. Ros, do you want to pick that on this type of extension?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So essentially, we have a local validation checklist which sets out what is expected for each type of application, and a shadow diagram isn't a requirement for a householder application. I mean, further to that, I mean, this is a particularly small-scale development, and as Meg has said, it's fully compliant in terms of its depth. Hillingdon has some quite prescriptive policies for householder extensions, and specifically it sort of refers to the depth which is allowable, and this extension fully complies with that. So personally, I don't feel it would be proportionate at all to request a shadow diagram in this instance. And furthermore, I would expect, with this being a small-scale proposal, if we were to request a shadow diagram, it would likely be one that perhaps wasn't a full technical report by a specialist, so I would have concerns then about relying on it as evidence. Thank you.
I just want to make that clear so the committee knows that, and obviously other things. Before I open we have a statement from Councillor Sweeting that Steve is going to read out.
So I'm about to read out a statement from Councillor Sweeting, Ward Councillor for West Drayton. I ask that the following written comments as Ward Councillor for West Drayton on the above application be considered at the Minor Applications Committee on the 4th of August, as I'm not able to attend the meeting in person. Although the officer's recommendation is once again for approval, there continues to be serious issues which I respectfully bring to the notice of the committee, which I ask to be considered. The issues are twofold. Firstly, the detrimental impact which the single-storey rear extension, together with the approved loft extension, will have on the attached number 54 Swan Road. The reduction of natural light to the main rear reception room of number 54 will be considerable, as the extension to 56 will dominate number 54 and create an enclosed courtyard effect to that property. The issue of overshadowing of the number 54 by the proposed 2 extensions at number 56 was debated at length at the previous meeting, and the need to have this problem thoroughly investigated was recommended by members by way of an overshadowing exercise being undertaken. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, this exercise has not taken place, and so this evidence is not able to be considered by members, which is unfortunate, as this would have been the only way, I believe, for members to have the evidence needed to make their final decision. Although members have visited the site, the provision of an overshadowing diagram would, I believe, have clarified the issue of overshadowing once and for all. We also still have the issue highlighted in the petition by a significant number of residents relating to the previous use of 56 Swan Road as an unofficial large HMO. Its use as an unlicensed HMO was reported on a number of occasions by the lead petitioner and many other residents as early as March 2020, and this was acknowledged by Hillingdon officers in email correspondence. The 3 bedrooms and its dining room and living room were all used, I am advised, as bedrooms, so creating a large 7+ capacity HMO. Unfortunately, due to COVID restrictions, officers were not able to confirm its use as a large HMO, although local residents have the necessary evidence. If officers had been able to confirm this, it could have meant that the recent approval of the loft into more bedrooms would not have been allowed under permitted development rules. The applicant has stated that the property is a family residence when it was in fact used as an unofficial HMO for some time prior. Therefore, on the current evidence, it is likely to be a large HMO again as soon as building work is complete. I therefore respectfully ask the committee to consider the 2 issues I have raised. However, if approval is indeed given to this application, I ask that every legal means be employed within the planning approval to put restrictions on number 56 Swan Road, which will confirm that its future use will not and could never be an HMO. I thank the committee for considering the points I've raised.
I'm going to pick up on some of those comments, please. First of all, I want to advise committee that the permitted development is not part of this application, so that should be ignored. I also want to advise the committee that in this report there is a condition here to make sure that it will never be used as a HMO. So that's another point. And again, we've already heard from the planning officer Ros about the overshadowing issues. Okay, so I want to make that very clear to everything that's just been said. I have Councillor Wanani and Councillor Brightman to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had site visit. We had quite clarity on the confusion when we discussing the application before. Our decision will not be based on the assumptions. We are making a decision whatever we have in front of us. We have a very robust officer's report, and we had a site visit. I'm in no doubt at all, and I would like to go with the officer's recommendations to approve the application.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Brightman.
Thank you, Chairman. To my mind, it makes sense to go with officers' recommendations, because at least then we can protect the residents from a further HMO being established there, whereas if we don't go with that, then that can continue to occur with no conditioning. And so I second.
Thank you very much. So I have a proposer and a seconder. Any other questions? No? Can I go straight to the vote, please? Those in favour with the officer's recommendations, please indicate. It's unanimous. Yeah, okay, thank you, Steve. That's all agreed. Now, before I let you all dash off to enjoy the evening and a glass of wine or something else, Meg would like to say something to us, so please, Meg, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Higgins informed you at the beginning of the committee, this is my last planning committee of my career, I hope. So after 38 years in planning of 33 in doing committees, it has come to an end. The reason I asked to speak is to thank, in particular, all members of the committee for their unfailing kindness and courteousness throughout the committees. This has been particularly the case at Hillingdon. There were cases at Brent and previous committees where it may not have been the case, but at Hillingdon, councillors have always been courteous. They've never attacked the professionalism of the officers, and for that I thank members of the committee, this committee and previous committees, councillors going back to Councillor Baker and Hensley of Central and South and North, through to Councillors Lavery and Edwards, and then through to Councillor Higgins and Tuckwell. So I thank all the chairmen for their kindness and all members of the committee. Thank you, Chairman.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. I'd just like to say that some of those 30 years I have been here for you as well. So, and I remember your kindness as well and support when I was the chairman. So thank you very much for that. Councillor Walala, you wanted to...
Chairman, thank you. I would like to take this opportunity through yourself to say thank you to Meg, and it's been wonderful. I have been on the committee since 2014, and I've seen his professionalism, his perfectionism on the reports, wonderful reports he presented, and obviously I had a couple of requests for site visit for him to in Useley, and he did very well. Yes, and the residents were very happy. So I wish him very well and his family in future.
Very much. I now bring this meeting to a close. Thank you very much, and thanks for those watching. Good night.